The transport ship New Dawn moved through space like a metal whale swimming through an endless dark ocean. Inside the ship, 200 humans were sleeping or talking quietly as they traveled to their new home on a planet called Kepler 442b. The journey would take 3 more weeks, but everyone was excited about starting fresh lives on a new world. Dr. Jake Morrison sat in the small family cabin reading reports on his tablet. He was a scientist who studied alien animals, though he had never actually seen any real aliens yet. His wife, Lisa, was fixing something on her computer. She was an engineer who helped make planets good for humans to live on. Their 8-year-old daughter, Katie, was drawing pictures of what she thought their new home would look like. "Dad, do you think there will be animals on our new planet?" Katie asked, not looking up from her drawing of purple trees and flying creatures. Jake smiled at his daughter. "Maybe, sweetheart. We won't know until we get there and explore." "I hope there are dogs," Katie said. "I miss Rex." Rex had been their family dog back on Earth, but he was too old to make the long trip to space. Suddenly, the ship shook hard. The lights flickered and went dim for a moment. People in the hallways started asking what was happening. Jake stood up and looked out the small window. But all he could see was stars. Captain Joe Blake's voice came through the speakers. "Everyone, please stay calm. We seem to have dropped out of hyperspace. We're checking what caused the problem." The ship shook again, harder this time. Katie grabbed her father's hand. "What's happening, Dad?" Before Jake could answer, the lights turned red and an alarm started making loud noises. Captain Blake's voice returned, but this time he sounded scared. "All passengers, please go to your cabins immediately. This is not a drill. We have an unknown vessel approaching us." Through the window, Jake saw something that made his heart stop. A massive ship was moving toward them. It was 3 times bigger than the New Dawn and covered in sharp metal points that looked like weapons. The alien ship was dark gray with strange symbols glowing red along its sides. "Lisa, get Katie into the emergency position," Jake said, trying to keep his voice calm. The alien ship moved closer until it was right next to the New Dawn. Then something incredible happened. Pieces of the alien ship opened up and smaller ships flew out. These smaller ships attached themselves to the New Dawn like metal spiders grabbing their prey. The sound of metal cutting through metal echoed through the ship. Katie started to cry softly. Lisa held her daughter close while Jake watched the hallway through their cabin door. Heavy footsteps echoed through the corridors. The footsteps didn't sound human. They were too heavy and made clicking sounds like claws on metal. Jake heard Captain Blake shouting orders to his crew, but then his voice stopped suddenly. The cabin door burst open. Standing in the doorway was something Jake had only imagined in his worst nightmares. The creature was 8 feet tall with skin that looked like black armor. It had 4 arms that ended in sharp claws, and its face had too many teeth. Its eyes glowed yellow in the red emergency lights. "Humans," the creature said in a deep voice that sounded like rocks grinding together. "You will come with us now." More creatures appeared behind the first one. They forced Jake, Lisa, and Katie out of their cabin and into the hallway with all the other passengers. The aliens were bigger and stronger than any human. When one passenger tried to run, an alien picked him up with one hand and carried him. Like he weighed nothing. The alien leader was even bigger than the others. He had scars across his face and wore what looked like medals on his chest. "I am War Commander Zethkar of the Vorthak Dominion," he announced to the frightened humans. "Your species is new to us. You are weak and slow. You have no useful technology. Therefore, you will be sold as workers to our mining colonies." Captain Blake stepped forward. He was trying to be brave even though Jake could see his hands shaking. "We're peaceful explorers. We don't want any trouble. Maybe we can work out some kind of deal." Zethkar looked at the captain like he was looking at a talking insect. "Your opinion does not matter, primitive creature. We have conquered 47 species across this galaxy. You are just another weak race that wandered too far from home. One of the aliens grabbed Captain Blake's weapon and crushed it in his hand like it was made of paper. Other aliens did the same to the security team's guns. The humans had no way to fight back. The aliens started separating the humans into groups. They used strange devices to scan each person and wrote down numbers. Jake realized they were being processed like animals being prepared for sale. "Dad, I'm scared," Katie whispered. "Stay close to us, sweetheart," Jake said. But he didn't know how to protect his family from creatures this powerful. The aliens were moving the humans toward their ship. In all the confusion and fear, Katie got separated from her parents. One moment she was holding her mother's hand, and the next moment she was alone in a crowd of crying people and alien soldiers. Katie looked around for her parents, but she couldn't see them anywhere. She was scared, but she was also curious. Where were the aliens taking them? What did their ship look like inside? Instead of crying or calling for help, Katie quietly moved away from the crowd. She found a door that led to a different part of the ship. The door was open, and no one was watching. 8-year-old Katie Morrison walked through that door and disappeared into the dark corridors of the alien ship, not knowing she was about to change the future of the entire galaxy. Katie walked through the dark hallways of the alien ship. The walls were made of black metal and covered with strange symbols that glowed softly. The air smelled different here, like metal, and something else she couldn't name. Her small feet made almost no sound as she moved deeper into the ship. She was looking for her parents, but she was also amazed by everything around her. This was her first time on an alien spaceship. The ceilings were very high because the aliens were so tall. The doorways were wide enough for their 4 arms to fit through easily. Katie came to a big door with warning symbols all over it. She couldn't read the alien writing, but the symbols looked scary. There were pictures of skulls and lightning bolts. Red lights blinked around the doorframe. Any adult would have known this meant danger and stayed away. But Katie was 8 years, old and curious. She found a button next to the door and pressed it. The door slid open with a soft hiss. The room beyond was huge, like an airplane hangar. The ceiling disappeared into darkness above her. Strange machines hummed quietly along the walls. In the center of the room was something that made Katie gasp. A cage made of glowing energy bars contained the most incredible creature she had ever seen. The animal was 12 feet tall and covered in black fur that seemed to swallow light. It had 6 legs that ended in claws as long as kitchen knives. 3 rows of sharp teeth filled its mouth. But what caught Katie's attention most were its eyes. They glowed like golden fire in the darkness. Most people would have run screaming from such a creature. The alien soldiers who brought it here had to use sleeping drugs and special weapons just to capture it. Entire armies had died fighting creatures like this one. It was called a void stalker, and it was the most dangerous predator in the known galaxy. But Katie didn't know any of that. She looked at the massive creature and saw something else entirely. To her 8-year-old mind, it looked like a really big, really sad dog. The creature's eyes opened fully when it sensed her presence. It had been sleeping, but now it was awake and alert. It studied this small being that had entered its prison. For thousands of years, every living thing that saw a void stalker either ran away in terror or attacked in desperation. Nothing ever, just stood there looking curious. Katie walked closer to the energy cage. She should have been afraid. The creature's presence should have filled her mind with overwhelming fear. Void stalkers had a special power that made other animals freeze with terror just by being near them. But somehow, Katie felt nothing except interest. "Hello there," she said softly. "You look really lonely." The void stalker tilted its massive head. In all its long life, it had never heard words spoken to it without fear or anger. This small creature was talking to it the same way she might talk to a pet. Katie sat down on the floor in front of the cage. "My name is Katie. What's your name?" She waited as if expecting an answer. You probably don't have a name, do you? The mean aliens probably just call you a number or something. She looked at the creature's dark fur and glowing eyes. I'll call you Shadow. Is that okay? You look like a shadow, but a nice shadow, not a scary one. Shadow the Void. Stalker continued to watch this strange little being. Nothing in its experience had prepared it for this. Usually, creatures either tried to kill it or begged for mercy. This one was having a conversation. I bet you're hungry, Katie said, reaching into her pocket. She pulled out a granola bar she had been saving for later. I only have this, but you can have it if you want. She unwrapped the granola bar and held it toward the energy cage. I know it's not much for someone as big as you, but it's really good. It has chocolate chips. Shadow looked at the offered food. It didn't eat things like granola bars. Void stalkers fed on the life energy of other creatures. But something about this gesture made it curious. Slowly, very slowly, it moved one massive claw toward the energy barrier. The moment Shadow's claw touched the energy field, alarms started going off throughout the ship. Red lights flashed and sirens wailed. The creature was supposed to be unconscious. It wasn't supposed to be moving or trying to escape. Katie looked around in confusion. Why are all the lights flashing? She asked Shadow. Did we break something? Heavy footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. The aliens were coming to see what had gone wrong. Shadow heard them too and turned toward the door. Its lips pulled. Back to show those 3 rows of deadly teeth. It's okay, Katie said quickly. They're probably just worried about you. Don't be scared. Scared. The word almost made Shadow laugh, if Void Stalkers could laugh. It wasn't scared of the aliens. It was deciding whether to tear them apart when they entered the room. The door burst open and 5 alien soldiers rushed in with their weapons ready. They expected to find their prisoner trying to break free or maybe already loose and hunting. Instead, they found an 8-year-old human girl sitting peacefully in front of the cage while the galaxy's most dangerous predator watched her with calm interest. The aliens stopped so suddenly that they bumped into each other. This was impossible. Void Stalkers didn't calm down around other creatures. They killed everything they could reach and tried to kill everything they couldn't reach. Little human, one of the soldiers called out in broken English. Move away from the cage. Very dangerous creature. Katie looked back at them. His name is Shadow, and he's not dangerous. He's just lonely. Look, he was going to share my snack with me. She turned back to Shadow. These aliens seem scared of you. Have you been naughty? Did you bite someone? Shadow tilted its head again. This small creature thought it was possible for him to be naughty, like a pet that had chewed up furniture. The concept was so strange that Shadow found itself almost amused. More aliens arrived, including War Commander Zethkar himself. He had come to see why his most valuable prisoner was causing problems. When he saw the scene in the cargo hold, he couldn't believe his eyes. How is this possible? He whispered to his soldiers. The creature should have driven her insane with fear by now. Katie heard him and turned around. Oh, hi there. Are you the boss? Shadow and I were just getting to know each other. He seems really nice once you get past all the scary teeth. Zethkar stared at the human child, then at Shadow, then back at the child. In 300 years of military service, he had never seen anything like this. The most feared predator in the galaxy was having a peaceful conversation with a human youngling. This changed everything. War Commander Zethkar stood frozen in the doorway. His soldiers pointed their weapons at Katie, but none of them dared to move closer. They all knew what Void Stalkers could do to living creatures. The fact that a human child was sitting calmly next to one made no sense at all. Child, Zethkar said carefully, you must move away from that creature immediately. It is extremely dangerous. Katie looked up at the tall alien commander. You keep saying Shadow is dangerous, but he hasn't done anything mean to me. Maybe he's only dangerous to people who are mean to him first. She turned back to Shadow and spoke as if she was talking to a neighbor's dog. These aliens captured you, didn't they? That's why you're in this cage. I bet that made you really angry." Shadow listened to her words. For the first time in countless years, another creature was trying to understand how it felt, instead of just fearing it or trying to control it. The concept was so foreign that Shadow didn't know how to respond. Katie reached into her other pocket and pulled out a small toy. It was a bouncy ball with stars painted on it. "Want to play fetch? I know you're in a cage, but maybe you could roll it back to me." She gently tossed the ball through the energy barrier. It bounced off Shadow's massive front paw and rolled across the floor of the cage. Shadow looked down at the small round object, confused. Nothing had ever thrown toys at it before. "Go ahead, pick it up," Katie encouraged. "Then push it back, to me with your nose or your paw." Very slowly, Shadow bent its enormous head down and sniffed the ball. It smelled like the human child and something sweet. Using one careful claw, Shadow pushed the ball back toward Katie. The ball rolled through the energy barrier and stopped at Katie's feet. She clapped her hands together happily. "Good boy, Shadow. You're really smart." Every alien in the room gasped. A void stalker had just played a game. These creatures were supposed to be mindless killing machines, driven only by hunger and rage. They didn't play. They didn't follow instructions. They certainly didn't respond to praise like trained animals. Katie picked up the ball and threw it. Again. This time Shadow was ready for it. The massive predator actually moved to catch the ball before it hit the ground, then gently placed it near the energy barrier for Katie to retrieve. "This is impossible," whispered one of the alien soldiers. "Void stalkers cannot be trained. They cannot be tamed. They kill everything they see." Zethkar was thinking the same thing, but he was also thinking about something else. If humans could somehow control void stalkers, then humans were not the weak, primitive species he had thought. They might be the most dangerous species in the galaxy. "Bring the human scientists," he ordered one of his soldiers. "I need to understand how this is happening." While they waited, Katie continued playing with Shadow. She had moved on from fetch to teaching him simple commands. "Sit," she said, making a downward motion with her hand. Shadow had never been asked to sit before. It stared at Katie's gesture and somehow understood what she wanted. Slowly, the 12-foot-tall predator lowered its rear end to the floor. "Good boy," Katie said, clapping again. "Now lie down." Shadow looked confused by this request. Katie demonstrated by lying down on the floor herself. "Like this, see? Lie down." After a moment, Shadow carefully lowered itself until it was lying on its belly with its massive head resting on its front paws. It looked exactly like a giant dog waiting for its next command. The alien soldiers backed away from the cage. They had seen void stalkers tear apart starships with their bare claws. They had watched these creatures destroy entire planets. But they had never seen one take orders like a pet. Dr. Jake Morrison arrived with 2 alien scientists. He had been worried sick about Katie since she disappeared. When he saw her sitting peacefully next to the galaxy's most feared predator, his father instincts told him to rush forward and grab her. His scientist instincts told him to stay very still and observe. "Katie," he said softly, "please move away from there very slowly." "Hi, Dad," Katie said without taking her eyes off Shadow. "Look what I found. The aliens were keeping this poor animal locked up all by himself. His name is Shadow, and he's really friendly once you get to know him." Jake looked at the void stalker. The creature was watching him with those glowing golden eyes, but it didn't seem aggressive. If anything, it looked curious about this new human. "Katie, that's not a regular animal," Jake explained carefully. "That's a void stalker. They're very dangerous predators." "Shadow's not dangerous," Katie insisted. "Watch this. Shadow, wave hello to my dad." Shadow tilted its head, then slowly lifted one massive paw and moved it back and forth in what could only be described as a wave. Jake felt his knees go weak. Zethkar stepped closer to Jake. Human scientist. Explain this. How is your offspring? Controlling our prisoner? Jake watched his daughter continue to interact with the Void Stalker. She was scratching behind what she assumed were its ears, and the massive creature was actually leaning into her touch like a cat enjoying being petted. I think, Jake said slowly, it's because she doesn't see it as a monster. She sees it as an animal that needs friendship. Friendship? Zethkar repeated the word like it was from a foreign language. Humans evolved alongside many predatory species on our home planet, Jake explained. We learned to understand animal behavior and body language. We developed the ability to form bonds with other species, even dangerous ones. Our children especially seem to have this gift. Katie had moved on to teaching Shadow to shake hands. The enormous predator was carefully touching its claw to her tiny hand while she giggled with delight. Your species bonds with predators? Asked Subcommander Kralnith, the ship's science officer. We domesticated wolves into dogs, turned wildcats into house pets, and taught bears to perform in circuses, Jake said. We don't see dangerous animals as enemies to be destroyed. We see them as potential friends who just need to be understood. At that moment, Katie yawned. It had been a long and exciting day, and she was getting sleepy. Without thinking about it, she curled up against the energy barrier and closed her eyes. Shadow watched the small human settle down for sleep. Something stirred in the ancient predator's chest, an emotion it had never felt before. This tiny creature trusted it completely. She felt safe enough to sleep while it watched over her. Slowly, carefully, Shadow moved to the other side of the energy barrier and lay down so that its massive body was curled around Katie's sleeping form. For the first time in galactic history, a Void Stalker had chosen to protect instead of hunt. The aliens in the room watched in stunned silence as the most dangerous creature in known space became a guardian for a sleeping human child. Everything they thought they knew about both species had just changed forever. News of what happened spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. Within hours, every major civilization knew that a human child had somehow tamed a Void Stalker. The reaction was immediate and intense. On the crystal world of Arcturus, Prime, the Hive Queen Vexara called an emergency meeting of her advisors. The insectoid queen had ruled for over 1,000 years, and her species had lost 3 entire colonies to Void Stalker attacks. If humans can control these beasts, she clicked to her generals, then humans are either our greatest allies or our worst enemies. In the metal cities of the Zentari Empire, Admiral Thexandros paced back and forth in his war room. The Zentari considered themselves the finest warriors in the galaxy, but even they had never successfully captured a living Void Stalker. A single human child did what our entire military could not accomplish, he growled to his officers. This changes the balance of power in the galaxy. The Galactic Federation Council convened an emergency session. Representatives from 12 different species gathered in the Great Meeting Hall on Nexus Station. The chamber filled with worried voices, speaking in dozens of different languages. We must study these humans immediately, declared the Crystalline, being known as Architect Prime. Their biological capabilities may exceed our understanding. Or we should destroy them before they become a threat, suggested General Korath of the warlike Threx species. Any race that can weaponize Void Stalkers cannot be allowed to expand across the galaxy. Meanwhile, aboard the Vorthak ship, Katie had woken up from her nap. Shadow was still lying protectively near her, and she smiled when she saw him. Good morning, Shadow. Did you sleep well too? Shadow made a sound that was almost like a purr. Katie giggled and reached through the energy barrier to pet his massive head. The alien scientists watching them took careful notes on every interaction. Dr. Morrison had been allowed to stay with his daughter, though he was surrounded by armed guards. He watched in amazement as Katie continued to bond with the Void Stalker. She had taught Shadow several new tricks while he slept, including how to nod yes and shake his head no. "Katie, can you ask Shadow some questions?" Jake suggested. "I want to see if he really understands language." "Okay, Dad," Katie said. She turned to Shadow with a serious expression. "Shadow, are you hungry?" Shadow nodded his massive head up and down. "Are you happy?" Shadow tilted his head thoughtfully, then slowly nodded again. "Do you want to hurt anyone here?" Shadow immediately shook his head from side to side, then looked directly at Katie and made that purring sound again. War Commander Zethkar had been watching these exchanges with growing concern. His species had built their empire on being the strongest and most feared warriors in the galaxy. But if humans could turn the galaxy's apex predators into loyal companions, where did that leave the Vorthak? "Human scientist," Zethkar said to Jake. "How many of your people have this ability?" Jake considered the question carefully. "I think all human children have some level of this gift. We're naturally good at reading animal emotions and body language. Adults can learn it too, but children seem to have an instinctive understanding." "All human children?" Sub-Commander Kralneth repeated in shock. "Katie isn't special in that way," Jake confirmed. "She's just being herself. Any human child would probably react the same way to Shadow." This news sent another wave of panic through the galactic communications networks. It was one thing if humans had a few rare individuals who could control Void Stalkers. It was entirely different if every human child possessed this ability. The political implications were staggering. Void Stalkers had been used as natural barriers to expansion for thousands of years. Entire star systems were considered off-limits because Void Stalkers lived there. Trade routes were planned around avoiding areas where these creatures might be found. If humans could not only survive encounters with Void Stalkers, but actually befriend them, then humans could colonize any planet in the galaxy. They could explore regions that other species had never dared to enter. They could become the dominant spacefaring civilization almost overnight. Admiral Thexandros arrived at the Vorthak ship with a small fleet of Zentari warships. His species prided themselves on being practical warriors, and he wanted to see this phenomenon for himself before making any military decisions. Katie was in the middle of teaching Shadow to play dead when the Admiral entered the cargo hold. The sight of a 12-foot-tall Void Stalker lying on its back with its paws in the air while a human child said, "Bang, you're dead," was almost too much for the Admiral's mind to process. "Remarkable," Admiral Thexandros muttered. "Simply remarkable." Katie noticed the new alien and waved. "Hi there. Are you here to meet Shadow too? He's really friendly. Watch this." She held up her hand and said, "High five, Shadow." Shadow carefully pressed one massive claw against Katie's tiny palm, being incredibly gentle to avoid hurting her. "How is this possible?" the Admiral asked Dr. Morrison. "Humans have been forming partnerships with other species for thousands of years," Jake explained. "We don't see other animals as things to be conquered or avoided. We see them as potential friends and partners. Katie is treating Shadow the same way she would treat any animal back home." Katie overheard this conversation and looked up at the adults. "Shadow isn't just any animal, Dad. He's special. I think he's been alone for a really long time, and that made him sad and angry. But now he has a friend, so he's happy." She turned back to Shadow and spoke to him like she was talking to a person. "You were lonely, weren't you, big guy? That's why you acted mean to everyone else. But you don't have to be lonely anymore." Shadow moved his great head closer to Katie and gently nuzzled her with his snout. The gesture was so tender and careful that even the battle-hardened Admiral felt his heart soften. "The question now," Admiral Thexandros said to Zethkar, "is what do we do with this information? The Council will want to make a decision about humanity's place in the galaxy." Zethkar nodded grimly. "Some will want to destroy them before they become too powerful. Others will want to ally with them, and some will want to study them to learn their secrets." Katie wasn't paying attention to the political discussions happening around her. She was too busy playing with her new friend. She had brought out a piece of string and was dragging it around for Shadow to chase, just like she used to do with her cat back on Earth. The sight of the galaxy's most feared predator playfully swatting at a piece of string with the enthusiasm of a kitten was the final proof anyone needed. Humans didn't just have the ability to survive encounters with dangerous creatures. They had the ability to transform those creatures from enemies into family. The future of the galaxy would depend on how the other species chose to respond to this discovery. But for now, in a cargo hold filled with watching aliens, an 8-year-old girl continued to play with her new best friend, completely unaware that she had just changed the course of galactic history. The next morning, Katie woke up to find dozens of alien ships surrounding the Vorthak vessel. Through the windows, she could see massive warships from species she had never heard of. The adults all looked very worried, but Katie was more concerned about Shadow. "Good morning, boy," she said cheerfully to the Void Stalker. "Look at all those pretty ships outside. I wonder if they came to meet you too." Shadow was restless. He could sense the tension in the air and the fear from all the aliens around them. His predator instincts told him that danger was coming, but his new bond with Katie made him want to stay calm for her sake. Admiral Thexandros received a message from the Federation Council. The decision had been made. Humanity was to be destroyed as a potential threat to galactic security. The vote had been close, but fear had won over curiosity. "I'm sorry," the Admiral told Dr. Morrison quietly. "The Council believes your species is too dangerous to be allowed to spread across the galaxy. The order is to eliminate all humans before you can weaponize the Void Stalkers." Jake felt his blood turn cold. "You're going to kill us because my daughter made friends with an animal?" "Not because she made friends with it," Admiral Thexandros explained sadly. "Because she proved that your entire species could do the same thing. Imagine thousands of humans, each with trained Void Stalkers as companions. No military in the galaxy could stand against such a force." Katie overheard part of this conversation. She didn't understand all the political words, but she understood that the aliens wanted to hurt her family and friends. She looked at Shadow, who was watching the adults with growing agitation. "They want to hurt us, don't they, Shadow?" she whispered. Shadow rumbled deep in his throat. For the first time since meeting Katie, the predator inside him began to stir. These creatures were threatening his friend. Every instinct told him to protect her. "Wait," Katie said to the adults. "Before you do anything mean, can I show everyone something really important?" War Commander Zethkar was curious despite everything. "What do you wish to show us, small human?" Katie stood up and walked to the control panel for Shadow's cage. She had been watching the aliens operate it and thought she understood how it worked. "I want to show you that Shadow and I are really friends. True friends trust each other completely." Before anyone could stop her, Katie pressed the button that controlled the energy barrier. The glowing bars that had kept Shadow contained flickered and disappeared. Every alien in the room screamed and dove for cover. They expected the Void Stalker to explode into a killing frenzy the moment it was free. Weapons were drawn and alarms started blaring throughout the ship. But Shadow didn't attack anyone. He simply stood up, stretched like a cat waking from a nap, and walked over to Katie. The massive predator sat down next to the little girl and gently nuzzled her hand with his enormous head. "See?" Katie said to the terrified aliens. "Shadow won't hurt anyone because we're friends. Friends don't hurt each other, and they don't hurt their friends' families either." She turned to Shadow and spoke to him seriously. "Shadow, these aliens are scared of you because they think you want to hurt them. Can you show them you're nice now?" Shadow looked around the room at all the frightened creatures. For thousands of years, he had been exactly what they feared. He had destroyed ships, killed armies, and terrorized entire civilizations. But Katie had shown him something different. She had shown him what it meant to care about someone else. Slowly, Shadow walked over to Admiral Thexandros, who was frozen with terror. The Void Stalker studied the Admiral for a moment, then did something no one expected. He sat down and held out one massive paw. Katie giggled. "He wants to shake hands with you, Admiral." "It's okay. He's very gentle." With trembling hands, Admiral Thex Andros reached out and shook the Void Stalker's paw. Shadow's grip was careful and controlled, no different from a well-trained dog meeting a new person. The demonstration continued as Shadow moved around the room, peacefully greeting each alien. He didn't show any aggression or predatory behavior. Instead, he acted like a friendly giant who just wanted to make sure everyone knew he wasn't a threat. Dr. Morrison watched in amazement as his daughter orchestrated a diplomatic breakthrough that trained ambassadors couldn't have achieved. "Katie, what you're doing is incredible, but you need to be very careful." "I know, Dad," Katie said confidently, "but Shadow and I talked about it, and we think there's a better way for everyone to get along." She addressed the room full of aliens, like she was giving a presentation at school. "You're all scared because you think humans will use creatures like Shadow to hurt you. But that's not how friendship works. When you're someone's friend, you protect them. You don't attack their other friends." Katie looked up at Admiral Thex Andros. "If humans and Void Stalkers became friends, and if humans became friends with all of you too, then Shadow and his family would protect everyone in the galaxy, not just humans." The concept was revolutionary. Instead of seeing Void Stalkers as weapons to be controlled, Katie was suggesting they could become guardians for all peaceful species. Shadow seemed to understand what Katie was proposing. He moved to the center of the room and lay down, then rolled onto his back in a gesture of complete submission and trust. The message was clear. He was choosing to be gentle, not because he was forced to, but because he wanted to. Admiral Thex Andros was thinking quickly. His species had lost countless ships and soldiers to Void Stalker attacks over the centuries, but if these creatures could be convinced to protect rather than hunt, the galaxy would become a much safer place. "Human child," he said to Katie, "are you saying your people would be willing to help other species form friendships with Void Stalkers?" "Of course," Katie said, as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. "That's what friends do. They help each other." The political implications were staggering, but in a completely different way than before. Instead of humans becoming a threat with Void Stalker armies, they could become the galaxy's most valuable allies. They could help other species explore dangerous regions, establish colonies in previously unreachable areas, and defend against any real threats that might emerge. War Commander Zethkar made a decision that would define his legacy. "I withdraw my claim on these humans as prisoners. Instead, I propose that the Vorthak Dominion enters into a formal alliance with humanity." Admiral Thex Andros nodded slowly. "The Zentari Empire seconds this proposal. We request permission to send our own children to learn from human teachers." One by one, representatives from other species began expressing interest in peaceful contact with humanity. The tide had turned completely. Katie was playing fetch with Shadow again, unaware that she had just prevented a war and established humanity as a major galactic power. She threw her ball across the room, and Shadow bounded after it like an enormous puppy, his tail wagging happily. 5 years later, Katie Morrison stood in the observation deck of New Earth Station, watching a group of young aliens learning to interact with rescued Void Stalkers. She was 13 now and served as the galaxy's first official human-alien-animal relations coordinator. Shadow lay beside her, now wearing a collar that identified him as a galactic peace guardian. He had helped train dozens of other Void Stalkers to work with various species across the galaxy. The creatures that once terrorized space lanes now served as protectors for exploration ships and colony vessels. "Ready for another day of work, boy?" Katie asked, scratching behind Shadow's ears. Shadow made his happy purring sound and stood up. Together, they walked toward the training facility, where more rescued Void Stalkers waited to learn about friendship. In the end, humanity had found its place in the galaxy not through conquest or technology, but through the simple power of kindness. And it all started when an 8-year-old girl looked at the galaxy's most dangerous beast and saw a friend who just needed someone to say, "sit," with love instead of fear. The galaxy was a safer and happier place because Katie Morrison had taught everyone that even the scariest monsters could become the gentlest protectors when treated with understanding and compassion.